Municipal Audit Committee to order. Assembly Mayor's President, Ms. LaFrance, and myself, Dyson. We'll start here and have everybody introduce, and I want everybody back there to introduce yourselves as well.
Mike Chadwick, Internal Audit.
Susie Marshall, Chief Information Technology Officer.
Alex Lipka, Chief Fiscal Officer.
Sam Thompson with BDO.
Alex Active. Dale Gardner, IT.
Mark Merchant, Chief Information Security Officer. Mark Dahl, Information IT.
Sean Jensen, Application Services Manager.
Robbie Long, Direct Services Manager.
Director of what?
Direct Services Manager.
Customer support.
Customer service.
All right, so we have three items of business here. We have the recovery plan and stuff in BDO. Did we already approve your workload for the next year? When did we get that?
Other things.
Pardon?
Today, we'll give you a draft today.
And we'll do that the next meeting.
If you could do it today or the next meeting.
Okay.
If you like the draft, we'll go with it. But usually we wait.
Sure. All right, so who's going to make a presentation on the business recovery plan?
I can start, and then Susie will pick up the pieces.
Sure.
As you recall, back in August, we released an audit report regarding the Information Technology Business Continuity Plan. And when that was presented, the IT director said that they would put together a finalized plan at the end of November.
And as I remember, the code or something says that it's supposed to be updated or something like that. And probably in the press of the SAP crossover that the updating and a written one hadn't been done for some time. Is that what?
Well, code was just updated about a month ago. or
Yeah.
so?
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
It was in code before that.
Right. They delivered the plan to us right at the end of November. We reviewed the plan. I have to apologize to Susie. I called her the Chief Technology Officer. It's Chief Information Technology Officer. After reviewing the plan, and this is the plan right here, it appears that the Information Technology Office of Information Technology has significantly improved its disaster recovery plan. Just to highlight a couple things, attached to the memo is a table that helps them prioritize IT requests, and we felt that the use of the matrix in place of predetermining system priorities is an effective alternative and would provide greater flexibility for the IT department. We also note that there are municipal data centers that are external to the Office of Information Technology. For example, traffic engineering, the office has no access or visibility to their environment. Communication shop, which does a lot of the radios. Once again, the Office of Information Technology has no access or visibility to this environment. It's external to the municipality. AWU is similar to that. They connect to AWU, but backup and recovery are AWU's responsibility. So there are some things that are, most things that they have access to and visibility to, but there are some things that they don't have access and visibility to. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so does that infer that AWU can operate independently? Doesn't need to be a part of the larger recovery thing, or at least their critical operation?
Probably a question for Susie.
Yeah, they do operate independently, but they do coordinate with us. But we don't direct what they do, so we don't have access or passwords or direct connectivity like that. But we do often coordinate, like they are part of our incident response team. They will talk to us about different, we'll coordinate softwares, but overall, yes, they are on their own schedule their own backup recovery. If there is a problem, we would call their IT department.
And then, so I assume that they have a system that runs the plant, you know, and does all the process
Mhm.
stuff.
Right, they
You
have
know,
a SCADA
and that's
system, yeah.
independent. And then the interfaces are like payroll, purchasing, and the reporting, and then disaster recovery.
As we've talked to them about, I asked for their plan, and I did not get a plan from them in writing.
Their
They
plan
could have
for
one.
what part of
Disaster
the-
recovery.
Okay.
Disaster recovery.
All right, excuse
Yeah.
me.
So,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it seems like, I hadn't thought about that piece, so this is kind of new, the notion that there are enterprises and aspects of the municipality that don't.
Can I show you a picture real quick?
Yes.
It'll help explain. I'll give you guys each one. Just so that you can see the things that are outside of our network would be you can see there's AWU, communication shop, traffic, but there's also GIS is something we don't have direct interface, so over here and up there.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's just something to make note of. We, like I said, AWU at least works closely with us, and we do talk to them frequently, and we do share technology when we can, licensing, but we don't direct their very specific day-to-day activities.
Is there any risk associated with having it structured this way? Or do you see any changes that need to be made? I mean,
I think there was a big effort, I don't know how many years ago, my team might be able to, when we split up, were we ever a team?
I don't remember what year it was, but they were fully integrated, and there was a decision to allow them to break off, and so we assisted with them breaking off. So they don't participate in our email system, they have their own independent, we do things in the middle that makes them visible to our systems.
Yeah.
may I follow up? So how about like the port and Merrill Field?
We definitely, they're all part of our network. Yep, we do their emails, we manage their servers, we manage the connectivity to them. I mean, and the rest of that diagram that shows you, it's really quite interesting, I think, from, that was one of my fun things with this exercise, is to go through and really see all the different places that we do connectivity to and what we do support. You know, Parks and Recs, there's 12 sites. We do the transit center, there's 3 sites. Solid Waste Services, 5 sites. Permanent Center, Merrill Field. So we do all of that. We do all their connectivity. We manage their mail, their servers, all their most of their apps, I would say. But there are some things that just are outside of our. These were things that were negotiated years ago, and I'm sure if there was a will, we could probably change that. But I think right now it's just kind of how it is.
It's just kind of odd, traffic engineering.
And that one's very happy to be away from us. I only say that because when I said, "Hey, can I get a tour of your data center?" They're really like protective. We do that with the state. Don't touch it. Other IT managers have tried to touch it, I guess. I probably more of a, well, who knows, really.
Yeah.
But that's really super separate than us. So I don't even know what kind of network they have. I don't know anything about their equipment. We just couldn't help. So if it went down, we'd have to say, you have to call these people. And, and we could be there maybe on the ground if somebody gave us like a password and something, we could try to help. But for the most part, we are definitely hands off on that one.
So if I was them, I would make the argument that they need to have as near to a firewall between their process operation and the rest of the world. Because those things, if they get sabotaged, have very direct real-time impact.
Yeah.
And there's been lots of studies on national defense talking about how vulnerable we are for the power grid, for instance.
Oh, definitely.
Flood control, and water control, and all those kind of things. And be interesting if that's a part of their rationale for that kind of distance between
I
you
think
and
the
them.
state also paid for a lot of the infrastructure that was built. I think the state gave them money, so.
So I guess, Alex, I guess it would be interesting for us and maybe you to understand what their rationale is and how prepared they are internally. I suspect they would think that requests from you and me would all be irritating and a nuisance.
I would be happy to follow up, working in conjunction with IT to explore why the current environment is structured the way it is, and if there is opportunities for improvement.
Yeah, and I realize I'm preaching to the choir, but we need to be assured that they have the expertise to troubleshoot their system, the process control particularly, just with a phone call, They're not having to get you and your staff and teach you their passwords and stuff in order to get something going. All right, please.
Regarding simulated disasters, the plan states that they'll be introduced, will be based on realistic events. And the plan also states that a facilitator will ask questions and participants will discuss solutions to the scenarios. The plan doesn't say when those scenarios will take place or if a facilitator would be an independent third party facilitating that exercise. I know that Susie has talked a little bit about that, about when that might take place. Regarding SAP disaster recovery, the plan basically states that disaster recovery has never been tested for SAP. They tried to get that tested before the go-live date, but it didn't happen. And so they don't have any idea at this point what will happen if a disaster is declared with SAP.
Yeah, and for the record, we've been joined by Felix Rivera, our chair. Thanks. We tried to be effective without you, but it was difficult. So, who should speak and defend the plan, the continuity plan?
So if you need.
Yeah, so what should we do?
As far as SAP? Testing wise? So one, we do want to do an annual simulated disaster testing. We just don't have a plan yet. Our goal is to first quarter define what our plan will be and then implement it. And I don't have a specific date yet, but we will have a plan by the end of first quarter on how we're going to do that. So I just don't have it yet. I mean, we could.
Yeah, Alex?
I would only suggest that, having participated in a number of these when I was in private businesses, that they are not unannounced, that they are planned for, everybody understands when it's going to happen. You walk through a number of steps so that everybody is looking at the exact same thing, and so when something breaks, everybody can see it. So you can walk through and you can figure out what broke, why, and how you solve it. If you do something unannounced, something might break and it might be apparent to one person but not to everybody else, and that's why these are usually planned events.
Yeah, so you get everybody at the table and everybody
Right.
gets a chance to learn.
Right.
Yeah, so I have a close associate is involved with this kind of stuff with DOD on a nationwide level. They said what will happen is the Inspector General or whatever, by whatever time, walks in and says, "You're down." Let's see how many hours you can recover with all your off-site stored information and get it going. And oh, by the way, do you meet the timelines for the different critical components here? And so been a time in human history when everything is so dependent on one means of communication, and which is marvelously efficient and terribly vulnerable. And so,
So we will create a plan. Just
Pardon?
like, we are gonna create a plan and we will exercise it next year for
Yeah,
sure.
so-
I
I would strongly encourage you to let one or more of us be an observer,
sure.
and the chair can pick that person or so, and somebody from the auditor's team. And whoever you have participate, including us, needs to be keenly aware of some things that are proprietary. You don't want somebody walking out of that room the next morning and saying, blogging, here's where this vulnerabilities are, here's how you do it. All right, go, please continue, Ms. Chadwick.
Finally, the plan does note some areas for improvement regarding, for example, service level agreements that contain clear and concise parameters that are measurable. And it also notes another area of improvement would be getting a current listing of software as a service that's used by municipal employees. Software as a service, that's a software, I looked this up because I thought I gotta define this because no one's gonna know what that means. Software distribution model in which a third-party provider hosts applications and makes them available to customers. Basically, correct me, Susie, if I'm wrong, municipal employees downloading something that INT may not know about.
Well, I'm gonna add to that.
Okay.
So it's not that so software as a service, so like you could, I'm gonna compare email. So if you did Google Gmail, that would be software as a service as opposed to municipal email. This is an example, right? So there are some software that we don't host on our internal services that are hosted on a server somewhere in the cloud that is providing providing support for could be a business unit or so like an example would be one of the GIS platforms is they have is it ArcGIS Online, is that the tool?
Mm-hmm.
And that one is hosted on the Esri platform and they serve maps off of that tool. So we go in and we build maybe a little custom thing, but we have to connect to that server. The server, you do your work there, saves it, and it serves it to the public from there instead of from our internal network. So that's what software as a service is. So what happens is a lot of times, it's getting better because we're getting our arms in front of it, but there have been many times where a department could use their credit card and just subscribe. And it would be less than a credit card limit, for example. So they could just subscribe to a service and just pay it, and we wouldn't know because it wouldn't go through a normal procurement process. So we're getting in front of that. So we're saying we want to make sure that we vet those instances. Like we don't want to have PII, private information up there in a cloud if that software as a service provider doesn't meet all these federal requirements.
Yeah.
So we've been working really hard with purchasing over the last year to get in front of that, and they've been really including us. But what we do know is that we don't have every agreement like that in our records. So we do need to make sure that we're keeping copies of those to make sure that when somebody says, what is this application, and it does this, and we'd be able to look it up. But right now, we don't have all of them. We have some, maybe, I don't know, half. I don't know if we have a number, but we're getting better at it. It's just definitely an area of improvement.
So, having had to work to some tight deadlines like you've had to produce this, I suspect you were scurrying around, and some parts of it looked like you'd grabbed something from someone else that was pretty applicable, put it there, and change the nomenclature and stuff.
Oh, did you read it?
I'm not as dumb as I look.
Well, I mean, did you read this one?
Mike has shown me some parts. Of
Oh, okay.
that. Appreciate the swear word staying in there. That was great.
Do you like that? I'm really good at that. I do know, I will just add to that, because we do 24/7 support right now for the business, that we currently do have how we do that. And that is that one matrix that you're saying, that's how we provide support. So we do already have a, how we do business, like a service agreement. And then, so that is already in there, something we've already developed. But that's, we just kind of step up and be focused based on the emergency.
Yeah, and Felix, what the kind of thing we're talking about is a real world test that administration will do on some level here.
Thank you.
And, yeah, all right. Yeah.
Just one last thing, not necessarily in the plan here, but just a couple of things you probably ought to be aware of. Next year, they have $10,000 budgeted for penetration testing, I believe it is. They also are going to be implementing new firewall that will provide additional tools that they do not currently have. And then I just learned, though I don't know anything more about this, that the Department of Homeland Security will do a cybersecurity audit. And I don't know what that entails, but they'll do it for free if you get onto their list, I guess.
Yeah,
So, but I don't know exactly what they do, and I'm not sure IT knows exactly what it comprises, but it could be an option worth exploring.
do you want to learn more about it? I can have
Sure.
Mark talk about it for a second, about what Department of Homeland Security that.
Yeah, DHS, actually, they have, I'm not sure if you're familiar with CISA, it's a cybersecurity infrastructure team, but they have like 17 guys worldwide that, nationwide that go out, SLTT, state, local, tribal, territorial governments, and they'll do free assessments. But it's, as you know, there's a lot of states, or there's 50 states and there's hundreds of communities, so it's about getting on their list. And then once, they'll give you a time frame, which when it's available, they can come up and actually do an assessment. And they base it off the top 20 critical controls and that type of stuff. But it's all detailed out, and they've got their plans to do that. So it'd be good to get on their list, I think is what they're saying.
Yeah, this is kind of a management decision, but would you, or are you thinking about having an expert observer there that's not on your payroll or our person? Is to observe our test and recovery.
We can do that. I don't have it on the plan, but we can list it as a.
Well, but that's kind of, and we're not in a position to be able to impose that on you. But it's so critical, and you could sure fool me and say, yeah, everything's down, now we're starting the recovery. And you could fool me easily, Alex.
I guess I would add that the municipality as a whole, and IT in specific, has no incentive to fool anybody.
I know.
That we have every incentive to do things correctly. And so I think that a good step forward is to run a test, fully prep for it, see what's going on. Because I know in the course of having to prepare this, they have already discovered some things that they need to fix. And so in the course of, it's like running a preparation for a disaster. You don't know what breaks until you actually try
Sure.
and test every little piece, shut this down, does this recover, does this happen? And so I think it's helpful to go through the first time internally, report back, this is what we did, this is what we found, these are our follow-ups, and then maybe the second time through, bring in somebody with expertise beyond what is already available on staff to observe and confirm what we know.
Do entities like us ever hire some people who are good at it to see if they can penetrate our security?
Well, I think this is what
Yeah.
Susie's saying, that they're going to do just that.
Yeah, we have a penetration test. We are scheduled. We have a budget for it, and we plan to do it next year, for sure. And then we also are gonna have a network architect assessment where they come in and confirm that our network is configured appropriately, and we have all the, the firewalls in place and can do all the things that we want it to do. And that's also on next year's horizon in our budget. And then as we were talking about this morning, we were like, oh, right, and the Federal Department of Homeland Security, we should get on there with this too, so, yeah.
And I would add that we already continually know that the single largest source of any failure is individual inattention. Somebody sends an email to a person, they click on the link, and it takes everything down. So we routinely, internally generate, IT does, send out well-crafted, fake-looking emails to employees to see if people have been trained up enough beyond the training that they're required to take, and see will they click on something inappropriately. So, I mean, that is ongoing all the time because it's well recognized that it's the single biggest way that we can fail.
Yeah, and in a larger sense, the whole population, is subject to some of that.
Right.
Our Public Safety Committee had a little bit of hearing on that. And it really got down to our people, APD, are not working that kind of stuff. The only thing they do is sex crimes and trafficking online. The FBI is doing some. I don't know what the state is doing. But there's not, when I approached the Daily Disappointment and asked them to run a series of articles on the scams that are coming at us all, and they have not responded, but it'd be really good if there was a clearinghouse of the kind of scams you guys are running, and somewhere that got posted, give us all, an alert to the new, different kind of things. I've really complimented when somebody in Nigeria says that the Nigerian prince and his family are trying to escape, and they've done research. I'm the single most trustworthy person in the country, and if I'll give them my account numbers, they'll put $1.5 million in there, and I get a 10% just for. I felt so good.
Sign me up. I must not be.
If I was them, I would trust you more than me. But does anybody do clearinghouses like that? Do other jurisdictions?
There's a lot. Mark, do you want to kind of talk about? There's a lot.
I'm trying to think of nothing probably internal as far as government-wise to Alaska that has a not that we shouldn't, because I think it's a great idea. But there are locations that you can go and you can look and see all the breaches that happened in Alaska in the last 20 years, and maybe stuff like that. To your point, would help people understand that this is real, and this is things that we should things that we should do to make us better.
So I'd be really interested in knowing if other jurisdictions, towns, counties, states, whatever, regularly have an updated website to let people know of the latest scams that are happening. Startling variety.
No, I agree 100%. I mean, what we get is what we hear from the news or internal, like what just happened in New Orleans. They just got hit. The city of New Orleans was just taken over.
But there is also the MSI's Act. We did talk about putting it in the employee newsletter that gets sent out via email, kind of like the latest scams that are in email. Or we did talk about doing that. I mean, because it's starting to become more. We get daily alerts.
Yeah, we on our cyber page, we do, as Susan's mentioned, we do have a link that you can go that goes to the MS. And if you're not familiar with the MSI's Act, it's the Multi-State Information Sharing Analysis Center. It houses all 50 states. It is the Information Sharing Analysis Center for all cyber, and it's sponsored. It's a nonprofit. It's sponsored by the Department of Homeland Security. They get a lot of their federal funding from them. But all updates, there's FBI and Secret Service and all government is involved in that, and they have a national conference every year. But there's a lot of information. In fact, they have with that nonprofit, one of our services that we pay for every year is called an Albert. It's called Albert, but what it is a net flow monitoring. So it monitors packets that go inside and outside of the city, and vets them against a global threat database. And if something is triggered that is bad, then we immediately get notified, and then we can go in there and break up that chain, that threat chain.
Mr. Chair, I think that's something worth us thinking about, because it seems to me that's a very valuable thing for the citizens to have, and the administration is so stretched on so many fronts, you're hesitant to. So if my tax proposal goes through, it would fit underneath that one. All right, yeah. Anything else on this?
No.
All right, so we will look at the plan and hopefully have it digested by next meeting, and we'll talk with you about it. Appreciate the work you did. I suspect it's been a real scramble.
Quick question.
Go ahead.
Thanks. On the SLAs, on the new service level agreements under the section areas for improvement, is that referring to for external providers or the internal ones to IT?
External.
External?
Yeah.
Okay. So like for the software distribution model, that would be an example where a new service level agreement would be used instead of just like the P-card transaction that doesn't have that level of
What we
detail.
so like we have right now this really big, huge GCI service level agreement, for example. We want to that's your standard build out. That's really talk what you're going to do for us, and that's mostly what we were talking about, like really working with our providers and making sure they are tailoring something specific to us.
Okay.
So, does that answer that
Yep.
question?
Thanks.
Anything else? All right. BDO?
So BDO is here, and Sam Thompson, who worked on the audit for a number of years, is going to
Thank you all.
walk you through his planning. I will remind you at the end of this, we are going to want you, Mr. Chair Fred Dyson, to sign this letter so that he can start their work starting. So I'll turn it over to Sam.
Well, thank you, members of the Assembly and members of the Audit Committee, for the opportunity to, one, be here today and go over our audit plan for 2019, and also for the opportunity to continue to serve the city. This is our 12th year in a row that we've been able to serve as the city's auditors, and we greatly value that relationship. So this document I have here, it's our required communications by our professional standards, and it just goes over really what we signed our contract last year to do. It's to audit both the financial statements of municipality as a whole. We refer to that as the CAFR, and also the individual standalone financial statements of Municipal Light and Power, Anchorage Water Wastewater Utility, the Port of Alaska, and Civic Ventures, and also to do an audit both in accordance with uniform guidance or federal auditing standards, as well as the State of Alaska single audit guide. And with that, we will conduct our audit in accordance with government auditing standards, and all that means is we look at, make sure the municipality is in compliance with laws, regulations, contracts, anything that if the municipality was not in compliance with could have a potential harmful legal or contractual effect on the municipality as a whole. So with that, I'll kind of skip forward a little bit. We'll just go to page 3, our overall audit timeline. I understand today is December 16th. We look forward to trying to complete our audit by June 30th, 2020. With that, we'll issue our reports throughout the time as different components of the audit are completed. So the first component of the audit is normally complete is the audit of Civic Ventures. We'll aim to issue that around April 15th. Historically, we've always issued that audit during the month of April, and I don't see any reason why that would be different this year. After that, I know everyone's really focused on when the audit of Municipal Light and Power will be done, as it falls into the proposed sale and finalizing those terms and agreements and moving forward with that. right now, so we've discussed with both members of public finance and also with Municipal Light Power themselves, and we're aiming to complete our audit and issue our opinion over Municipal Light Power by May 29th. And that would help facilitate an on-time sale as it currently has been proposed. After that, we look forward to issuing our audit of Port of Alaska around June 15th, Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utilities on June 25th. Finally, once everything's been issued at the standalone level, conclude and issue our opinion over the audit of CAFR, the municipality's financial statements as a whole, and also the single audits both for federal and state as of June 30th. As far as your client service team, Joy Mariner is still the partner in charge of the engagement. She's actually in Houston this week, so she was not able to attend in person, but she wishes everyone well. Sends her regards. I'll be back as well again. This will be my 10th year working on the audit. So it's been a whole decade, so look forward to another decade there. And the majority of our audit team will be back as well, our senior, our in-charges, and several of our staff members. So I think all in total, I think about 90% of our engagement team from last year will be back. So there'll be a lot of continuity, which always helps the process.
We won't schedule an earthquake next year.
That'd be nice. If you have that kind of
I realize
control,
it'd be
that'd
less,
great.
a little more boring.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. There's a lot of financial transactions that occurred in 2019 related to the earthquake that will have to be determined how they need to be presented in the financial statement. So the earthquake still has a huge impact on this audit. So we'll see how that all shakes out.
Any questions? Felix?
I do have one question, Mr. Chair, and first just a comment. If I told my colleagues that I was had been working on something for half of my life, I'm sure there would be some type of joke. But that's
Sam is over at Boulder.
Thank you. I wish I were going.
And second is on MLNP. So, what is the difference going to look like, assuming MLNP gets sold and approved by the RCA in April-May timeframe? What is it going to look like, the CAFR, in 2019 versus 2020?
That's a great question. So the 2019 CAFR will look very similar to every other year, 2018, 2017, in terms of municipal light power, since the whole year did pass, and the CAFR is prepared as of June 31st, 2019. So there won't be a big difference there. As far as June, the 2020 fiscal year CAFR, so municipal light power would not reflect what we refer to as a balance sheet, since all those assets and corresponding liabilities would have been disposed of. They would have been, sold as part of the sale. I mean, you guys just going to take.
Sam is saying June. What he's really meaning to say is December 31, which is the end of our fiscal year.
Correct.
Got it.
Correct. So the balance sheet would not show those assets or liabilities. Now, in 2020, the municipality will still show an operating statement, an income statement for Light Power, since Light Power will have approximately 5 to 6 months of operations. So just how the math would shake out, the revenues and expenses should be about half of what a normal year would show, because you're only in existence for about half a year. And then there would be some very unusual kind of closeout type entries where you would show the proceeds received from the sale would flow through the CAFR and be recognized as a type of revenue, a non-operating revenue that the municipality received. And that would be kind of the biggest, I guess, changes there. You'd see all the debt municipal light power had would go away if the municipality is no longer legally obligated for it.
Okay.
Follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So one quick follow-up. So aside from now just looking at 2018 versus 2019, are there going to be any significant changes or differences, or is it going to be pretty much the same?
I don't foresee there to be any. There's no new accounting standards that went into effect for fiscal year 2019 that will have a material impact on light power.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So, can you tick off a few of the things that you found in your last audit that showed areas where we needed to make improvement?
Certainly, we did issue one finding last year, and it was a significant deficiency, and had to do with a state program in terms of procurement records. So, under our professional standards, we'll have to go about and evaluate that and see whether or not the corrective action plan which they proposed actually went into effect, whether or not it was successful in remediating that finding. So that's one area we'll look at. That was the only official type of correction that we believe the municipality had to make in 2018, or in 2019, as of the 2018 audit. Of course, we always look at our internal controls and make sure things are staying up to date with the times. Cybersecurity is one that we just mentioned a half an hour or so talking about. We'll do another cyber kind of risk assessment based on the different information systems that the municipality is using, and making sure that the internal controls are still in place and they're being updated and modified over time to confront the new and existing risks that the municipality faces on that front.
So sometimes, and I think the public sector is probably worse than the private sector, but when they're putting out an RFP, they don't do a really good job of describing the conditions under which the contract will be in the area where it'll be performing. And then there are owner-initiated change orders and, oh, by the way, kinds of things that allow costs to really go up. So I've heard conflicting reports about how well we do on that and so on. Is that sort of thing a part of the within the scope of the auditing you all do?
Currently, we do test procurement. That's part of our government auditing standards audit. We make sure that the municipality is following both their own procurement code and also the federal rules related to procurement. So we will test that. But if we wanted to kind of take it a step further, go in another direction, and look at, I guess, the total number of maybe contract modifications, we can certainly build that into our audit procedures. I think that would be within the scope of our existing contract with you.
Yeah, so it's both ends of it. If it was civil work on real estate, not enough information there about what the soils are like or what previous work has been, or pollution sites there, or abandoned pipes or utilities or those kind of things. And then they show up when the contractor starts moving dirt, and so on. So that's an owner's obligation, that the contractor can come back at you, of course, and so on. So what would be the process of asking or directing you to pay more attention to that in this next cycle?
I think just the communication we had just now is all we would need. I don't believe we would need anything in writing. I'll make a note of that, and when we do our procurement type test work, we'll work that into our procedures. Now, we won't issue a separate report, anything on letterhead. Now, if you wanted us to go about doing that, we could discuss that, and that might require a formal written request submitted to us.
Yeah,
But
so
we can definitely build it into our existing procedures.
yeah, so I'm not clear that we can direct you to it, but I would like it to be a bit rigorous and reported if there is a problem. That you guys, your work.
I guess I would reflect that in actuality, since the assembly is contracting with BDO, that you can, but I think that maybe a good first step is, it's a perception that, there's a lot of contract modifications. I think you've directed them to look at and
Sure.
see how often does it happen and to what extent, and let them report back to you. And if it does look like it's something that needs further investigation, then at that time, that would be the point at which you should do it, rather than assume that there's an issue when there might not be.
Yeah, and I'm not assuming anything.
No, but it's standard. We all have the exact same thing. When you see a change order, it's like, well, how come? Why is this always more than it should have been?
Sure.
And I will say in the past, we do look at that. One thing we do when we test procurement is we're very sensitive for situations in which there are change orders or where maybe contracts are broken into smaller pieces to avoid triggering a threshold. And the municipality has to follow what they refer to as the uniform guidance procurement requirements now, and it's quite rigorous. So if you use federal funds, you spend over $10,000 on any one individual procurement, you're required to document your procurement process followed, and at least the number of quotes, or informal or formal, that you've received. Then anything over $250,000 requires that you go through a very rigorous formal process, an RFP type process or request for bid. The municipalities' procurement policies are more strenuous in that regard, but that is the federal rule. So we do work that into our test work currently.
All right, so.
I would be accurate on your comment relative to the earthquake, that the earthquake has triggered did trigger us looking very closely at what our policies are, what are the federal policies, so we can make sure that
Sure.
we're following them, so that we don't make a mistake in the procurement process and that somehow impacts our ability to get reimbursement under FEMA.
Yep. So, one last question. If you see in our financial management that there's an area where we need to improve, it's a judgment call. I'm thinking about the amount of emergency funds we have, or the balances we cover to, carry all those things, kind of thing that would affect our bond ratings and stuff. I assume you have a responsibility to alert us to those vulnerabilities.
Yes, our professional standards require that if we're aware of any failures in internal controls over financial reporting, and also the different compliance of laws and regulations on the audit, we are required to communicate that to the assembly of the audit committee, those charged with governance. We would do so in a formal written report, and then also orally at a meeting as well.
So do you monitor how we're doing on our accounts receivable and accounts payable when you go through it, our stuff?
Our responsibility is to opine on whether or not those amounts are correctly stated. In terms of making like a judgment call, whether or not the days outstanding is reasonable, it's not really the scope of our work.
Okay.
If it were misreported, or if it did present some sort of potential unreported liability to the city, then yes. Or if we had doubt over the collectability,
Sure.
we'd call that out if we thought it was materially misstated.
And so quite a few vendors will give you a little discount if you pay your bills within 90 days or 120 days and so on and so forth. Does your audit look to see if we are doing a good job of taking advantage of those on-time early payments?
No, we don't. That's not really. Hasn't been in the scope of our test work.
All right.
It is something we look at and are looking at.
Good. Alex, how is our accounts payable? Accounts receivable, I mean. How are we doing in collecting?
So you'll remember that internal audit actually did a review of that earlier this year, and we made some improvements in that process because we did discover that there were some entities outside of central government that hadn't been correctly reporting. The amounts were immaterial, but we did correct those deficiencies, so now we are seeing all of the accounts receivable and making sure that they're being tracked correctly.
But some of them are challenging.
I mean, it was like one, which I think you yourselves approved, would have been like library fines, right? Where it's not a big amount of money, but some of them were 6 years old, and obviously that fine is never going to get paid.
Yep.
So those were written off, and I think further, I think you approved a budget where, in fact, the library is no longer going to charge fines because it's counter to their mission, which we would approve of.
Any questions? Suzanne?
Thank you. So there won't be any more collecting for past due library fines, as we just said, Alex, right? All those are forgiven? That were.
I'm not sure exactly how that. I will get an answer to that.
I'm just curious. My question actually has to do with the schedule of the opinion dates. And right now, you don't foresee anything that would jeopardize those dates. I'm assuming that like for the CAFR, it might be third-party information like from the state in the past.
Yes, you're actually right. Now in the past, it has been an issue where the state would not finalize their PERS-related pension and OPEB reports in a timely manner. We are unaware of any delays this year, and last year they actually released those reports in April. So if they keep
Okay.
the same schedule as they did last year, the timing should work out great. But if we become aware of any delays there, we'll definitely let all parties know as soon as possible.
Okay, and then likewise for the ML&P audit, and I understand the RCA has to issue the decision by February 17th, and then if it's a yes, then Uni has 120 days to close, so it sounds like there's a pretty good buffer were there to be any unforeseen delays with that.
Yeah, I don't, as far as getting financial information for fiscal year 19, I don't believe that would have any effect on anything.
Okay.
Probably the biggest risk there is the time of the individuals and finance. They had to divert their attention away from the audit to work on finalizing the books and records in 2020 for the sale. That's potentially a risk there.
I'll give you some detail on what is probably going to happen with the sale. So we won't have audited numbers for 19, obviously, on ML&P until May 29th, which is correspondingly actually the day that we expect to close the sale at this point. The way that will work, though, is that we will actually sign all of the documentation on or about April 24th. So the actual documents all get signed about 5 weeks before the close, and then when the close date shows up, money just moves from the accounts. What will govern that will be a transition agreement where we'll settle on maybe the data as of March 31, unaudited, or maybe the December 31 unaudited data, and then there will be the opportunity to true those up with the actual results when they are known. We will have to do a formal audit as of May 29th, assuming that is the closing date. That most likely won't be done until the end of July. So there'll be a several-month period where we're going to be truing up the actual amounts owed, but in the whole scheme of things, it'll be in the nature of $10 to $20 million, where the whole transaction is roughly $1 billion.
Thanks.
All right. Mike, what should we do as committee members for looking at the recovery plan?
For the disaster,
Yes.
I think we need to give IT a little bit of time to implement what they've been doing, but I do intend to follow up with them to see when they're planning that disaster recovery scenario.
Yes.
They talked about doing it in the first quarter. So I think I don't know if we need to do anything until that disaster recovery scenario.
Right.
But we do touch upon this topic a little bit in our proposed draft audit plan for next year, if we want to move to that.
So I was assuming that we were going to look at this product, which updates, and so on and so forth, and we would say it's sufficient or not. Is that true?
I mean, we felt it was sufficient. When we looked at it, we thought that they made a really good effort and that there was significant improvements. They recognized some of the holes, like we talked about, some of the shortcomings, and then that was as a result of looking at this and realizing, we need to get these service level agreements and some of these other things nailed down a little bit more. But when we looked at this, we thought, wow, this is significantly better than what they've had before. We were impressed with the amount of work that they did in a pretty short time frame.
Yeah, and me too, but that doesn't mean whether it's good or not and sufficient to do it. So, what is that proprietary?
This?
Yeah.
I don't believe so, no.
Yeah, so what do you all want to do? You want to look at it, have a chance to, and so on, before our next meeting?
I thought it was going to come to us. I mean, is that
That's
draft?
what I thought.
Is that draft form?
No,
So
this is not draft, this is the plan.
That's the plan?
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, I thought it was gonna come to us for review as well.
That's what I thought.
I can ask you for a copy and get it to you.
Okay,
Electronic?
yep, and.
Electronic, I can ask you for an electronic copy and get it to you, if that's, for all three of you?
Yes, wow, electronic copy?
Woo.
Save the trees, Brad.
I want mine in paper.
Plant some trees.
All right.
And you, the two of you electronic.
Yes.
All right, and then, I think we should, and think about the process here.
Sure.
Whether we should consider asking BDO to look at the contract performance in terms of modification to contracts and so on.
Well, if that's something that we want to do, don't we have to make that decision now? Because I think the expectation is that you sign the contract.
No, we got clarity, so we're still waiting for Dean Gates to look at the contract. It's the same as last year, but he is gonna wanna look at it before he
Okay.
has you sign it. As long as you, I think, sign it before year end.
Sure.
we're okay.
Good.
I sent the copy of the contract on last Friday to the municipal clerk. She's running it through the attorney solution.
So let's be clear here. Could you look at that, that issue without us having to modify the contract and the amount of money we pay you?
Yeah, we could. It depends on what the end deliverable, if you'd like. If you'd like just for us to look at it, build it into our existing procedures, and then to orally just discuss the results with the assembly, we'd be happy to do that. If you'd like us to do a formal additional audit, some sort of agreed upon procedure where we specify a certain number of contracts and we do some sort of sampling and give a written report with our findings and recommendations, that would probably require a separate contract.
All right. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we'll choose the former, and so on. So, when will you be wanting this thing signed, Alex?
By year end, I think, by year end, because they're gonna start work on January.
Right. Right, so you all and you think about whether you're comfortable with me signing it based on what we know or what else we would want to know before signing this contract. All right.
Yep. I mean, from my perspective, I guess I could go home and look at this, but based on what I heard today, I would be comfortable with you signing it. But I agree, let's let Mr. Gates some time to review it and get back to us, because he always
Sure.
has a good way of finding out some things.
Yeah. All right.
I trust you, Fred.
Well, I mean, what basis would we, after a dozen years, figure out these guys? They tell me they're as good as their ads say. All right. Any other comments? We have for our next meeting kind of the work plan for and so on, and I've asked Mike to give us a kind of a diagram almost of the cyclic nature of their workload.
Ask and it is delivered. So, Mr. Chair, just to be clear, we're looking at this at the next meeting
Pardon?
of Audit Committee. We're going to look at the 2020 plan.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
We would like to present the 2020 plan, we'd like to present it at the meeting on the 28th, which means that we need to get it into the pay system right around the 16th or the 17th. So we probably need to meet sometime like on the 13th or 14th, maybe 15th, regarding this draft audit plan. So we probably need to do sometime early that week. You're welcome to send any thoughts that you have regarding the audit plan. Any questions that you have, please let me know.
So you don't do any work in August, September, October, November? Right here in fishing and hunting season? Talk about skillful editing or scheduling.
Mr. Chair, if I may, so
Yes, sir.
yeah, I would be comfortable with reviewing this at a meeting at one of those suggested dates, and then usually does the audit committee formally recommend adoption of the plan?
They endorse the plan.
Endorse the plan, thank you.
And then we send it to the assembly for approval.
Okay, so I'd be comfortable with that timeline. And with that, I do have to excuse myself. I have a 2:00 meeting upstairs.
All right.
Apologies.
Thanks. So, Mike, I asked you months or maybe a year ago to look at a vehicle maintenance, some particular, how far along are you on that?
We're almost done with the field work, looking at the vehicle maintenance for the fire department. In fact, we may finish that up this week.
All right. All right. Anything else for the good of the order? Any audience participation? All right. Thank you all. We're adjourned.